So for my research presentation, I chose to study Japanese theater, and I settled on Noh theater, which is one of the oldest major performing arts still in performance today. So getting on to Noh history, we start with the founders of the art, who are Kanami and his son Zeami. They were prolific actors of their time during the Tokugawa period of Japan, in which the shogunate and samurai ruled over the government. This was a militaristic dictatorship, and when they performed their art form for the shogunate, he loved it so much that he declared it the national art form. Because they were a national art form, they had lots of money to do just about anything they wanted and really solidify their traditions to their beliefs. So Kanami really wanted to combine two art forms that were very high in practice at the time, one of those practices being Saragaku, which was from China. It's a Chinese type of theater that is all performed outdoors. And also they wanted Dengaku to be a part of the mix, which was a beat that rice farmers would use to keep time and plant their rice and things. So with the combination of those two, we had Noh theater, which the word Noh means talent, which you need a lot of it to do this, seeing as actors train from the age of 3. And it was so beloved by the shogunate that they were allowed to really heighten their practice and make it beautiful. So it was carried by 4 families. Of course, Kanami and Zeami couldn't live forever, but the 4 families are in charge of keeping the traditions alive, and they were at the time Yusakiza, Sakuraza, Tobiza, and Enmaiza. And those 4 families were very good at doing their job up until the Tokugawa period ended and the shogunate fell. With the westernization of the government and the loss of funds to Noh, it almost died out. But we had an introduction of another family, Kitaza, who was in charge of keeping it alive, and due to Western influence and interest, Noh was kept alive, and it's still performed today. Shows can be almost upwards of 9 hours long sometimes. It is very well funded once again, and the art form is alive. So if we want to understand Noh, we have to get through some vocabulary first. The first word of which is Johakyu, very self-explanatory. Johakyu means beginning, middle, and end. And that is the traditional story structure that you would use in a Noh performance. Due to the fact that they don't have lighting cues and set pieces or even dialogue or facial expressions that they can use, it is really important to keep a simple structure in order to be able to depict it to an audience. So moving on to characters, we have the shite, which is the main character, traditionally all played by men up until the 1940s. They are the only actor that wears a mask in order to hide all of their facial expressions. And this, of course, because of his lack of mask, is not a shite. He is a waki, which is a supporting character. Their job in the show is to introduce the shite as well as to challenge them and move the outward struggle along. And finally, we have our last big element of the theater, the hayashi, who are the musicians in the back of the theater. They keep the beat. And we're going to move on to costumes quickly. Noh masks are very prolific and traditional as well as iconic to Japanese culture as a whole. Here we have the most used mask, which is the traditional female. Seeing as they were all played by men, they had to really depict the female essence of the character. And depending on the movement of the mask, they can even have different expressions due to the curvature of the masks. When pointed upwards, the eyes look like they're happier, and downwards they seem more sinister or even sad. So that continues to be seen throughout all the masks. Of course, here we have the Hanya mask, which is very iconic and tied to Japanese culture as a whole. We have demons here depicted, as well as spirits, and even an old man. And those are the most traditional masks that are most often used. Moving on to the costumes themselves, they're very elaborate and ornate and extravagant due to the fact that they had a lot of money, and they're performing these for nobles in the shogunate and the government, so they wanted this to be an aesthetically beautiful experience for them. I chose to make my own costume for this, and I really tried to go off of what they have, which is the floral aspects and the very warm, rich colors. And hopefully I did pull that off, because I want to stay true to their ways. So the traditional Noh stage is very important. Here we have the bridge in which all actors enter the acting area, and they also leave that way. The first person on stage is always the waki, so that they may introduce the shite here in the middle, and the shite is not allowed to enter the acting space until they have been introduced. Of course, off to the side here we have the waki, who is not currently in the way or the star of the show, as they've already done their job of introduction, and they stay out of the way until they are needed again. Also, we have the hayashikata, which are the 4 musicians directly behind the shite. They keep the beat and set the pace of the show. And then we have our koken, which there's 2 of them. They're stage hands. They make sure that the maintenance of the stage is up to par, and they go and fix anything that may go wrong during the show. We have an 8-member jyotai, which is in the corner. That is the chorus. Due to the fact that there's no dialogue, all verbal understanding and communication with the audience is done through the chorus and lyrics. And finally, the biggest architectural part of the theater that is symbolic and traditional is the Japanese pine tree in the back. Japanese pine trees symbolize longevity, steadfastness, and good fortune. And it's very important to the atmosphere of a show. Of course, these would be traditionally performed outside, but in modern times they have been moved into buildings. So I will be focusing in on no movement because it is a very big part of no theater in general. And of course, deliberation is key, I wrote, because it truly is. They are very dependent on silhouettes, and they make sure that every little movement can be seen so that you understand what is going on due to the fact that there's no dialogue or facial expressions to tell you. So once again, we have to understand some vocabulary, and this is where the demonstration portion of my research presentation will begin. We have our most important part of their movement, which is the kamae, in which they will lower their center of gravity by bending their knees, and they keep their arms in a sort of first position, which is what we would call it in ballet. But they're kept close to the hips in order to go just about anywhere. That way you have a complete range of motion and you don't have to completely use your body, and you can reach for things anywhere instead of moving with it. And they keep their center of gravity low with their bent knees, and this is just the posture that they keep throughout the entire performance. Then we have the hakobi, which is the walk, and due to this low center of gravity, they do slide their feet when they walk, because these movements can often be very slow in order to be deliberate so that you can see everything. And by sliding their feet, they can keep their balance much better than if they were doing something slow, as in walking like this, and if you lose your balance, you have to put it down, and that ruins the aesthetic beauty of the entire thing. So this way, if you were to lose your balance, you can do that, and it doesn't really show. So that is to help balance and keep the aesthetic perfect. Another part is ashibyoshi, which is the stamping. Of course, they're in their posture. And this can be used to either help the chorus or denote intensity in a scene. And they, of course, stay in their posture, and they will denote this all the time. And that is the only time that the feet should disconnect from the floor. And finally, something that I will be focusing in greatly on is the kata. Kata are the steps and movements that are in traditional no. They are all symbolic and have their own meaning. And you can even equate them to dialogue, since there is no spoken dialogue. It's almost like movement dialogue. So I have some examples of basic kata, which we will be going over. And of course, to do all of them, I must assume the posture, the kamae. And we're going to start off with to cry. It is very self-explanatory. You will bring up the palm to your eyes, almost as if you're catching tears in the palm of your hand. And by doing this, you are denoting that you're crying. Now, of course, the intensity of an emotion can completely change what the movement will be. So if I'm not just sad, but I am devastated at something happening, I will lean forward in my starting position and shuffle back to remove myself from the situation, bringing both hands to catch more tears, denoting a more intense sadness. We also have to request, which has multiple different versions of the move depending on the context of the show. Once again, we will assume our posture and bring our hands up to create a circle in front of us. And we don't turn, we pivot to the person we will request from and slowly sink down to the knees. To intensify the request, we will slide up one leg in a kneeling position, take our fist and up our pointer fingers and take our thumbs out, and we will bow, keeping our back straight as a sign of respect to the person we are requesting something from. And those are the traditional requests. Another way of requesting, which is very quick and shows how very focused you must be on your body in order to keep balance. They will hike the kimono in order to have a full range of movement, and they will slide one foot in front of the other, lowering each time, connecting the knee to the ankle, and falling back into a crisscross, keeping their arms in the first position. And that will be your request. Now, when talking about no theater, even when sitting, the feet will stay connected to the ground. So, if I were to try and turn and greet a guest, I would not be able to use my hands as they would be in first position. So I would instead use my feet, keeping them connected, to pivot my body in order to greet my guest. And I would turn back around in the exact same fashion. I haven't been training for 30 years, so I usually have to use my hand in order to help me do that. But you can't do that during traditional no, because it all takes practice. Of course, we have the fan, which is the most important prop used in no. It's big on symbolism, of course, and so the fan is the only prop, and it symbolizes anything you could possibly need. So if I were a noble lady, and I was just given a bouquet of flowers to declare love, flowers are very symbolic of love, I could have my beautiful bouquet, and I would feel very nice about it, because I just got slightly proposed to. Of course, instead of just being physical, they can also be used to set up the scene, seeing as there's no props, no set pieces. They are in charge of setting the scene. So if it's ominous, maybe a demon or a spirit is going to be introduced and I'm the walkie about to introduce them, I would have these low stratus clouds denoting a very ominous scene. Or if it's happy, like a marriage scene, I would have beautiful, cumulus clouds, big and fluffy. And of course, it all depends on context to understand what they're doing. If I'm a servant, I would keep my position, and I would offer a plate to my superior. Battle scenes are incredible, and they use the fan to denote swords. Of course, keeping in their kamae, they may ashibyoshi, they may stamp, which denotes a death. And this is the only time that they'll disconnect their feet from the floor, and it can signify a sword fight as well as deaths. And finally, once again, being a noble lady, I could have an umbrella on a sunny day, and the rain is falling maybe even, or flower petals or something beautiful depending on the scene. So the fan is the biggest piece of symbolism they have. My moment of theater that I chose to do is a contemporary no piece performed and choreographed by Satu Runa. So the scene that she is trying to depict is the death of two parents and how love will help her overcome this. There's very many symbolic moves that are used, and I will be explaining my way through it. So she will begin in her posture, and she will turn, not disconnecting her feet from the floor. And here we have our first symbolic move, a death. And another death. And she will come back into herself by backening her shoulders, and she will reach out for something. But she will be prevented. And she will mourn them as they are now being lowered into the ground. And she will mourn by covering herself up. And another symbolic move that she chooses to have is turning around and reaching. And because it is contemporary, she straightens her legs. And she can't get what she wants. So once again, we have a symbolic move here, the introduction of love. So she parallels her last movement and is once distracted by the love that has just overtaken her. And she will move around and denote flower petals falling, which is once again symbolic of love. And while paralleling this move one more time, she reaches with love, is distracted, and finds her resolution in it. And that is my moment of theater. So of course we saw in her movements very many symbolic things that communicated everything without the use of dialogue. During the show, she keeps her facial expressions completely blank. And that really shows you how important it is to be conscious of your body and what you are telling to the audience. My final reflection and what I learned from this. As an actor, I really do depend on my face and my vocal expression to depict a scene and emotions. And while I was researching this, of course I learned a lot about Japanese history, but I also learned how I do have to depend on my body and see what it's saying to people. I've never had to be so conscious of my balance and my body before, and now I do, and it's a completely unfamiliar feeling, but I'm glad to have learned it because now I can use it for the rest of my acting career. So I'm very happy to have been able to research this, and thank you so much.